Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Above the Break podcast. First, I want to say thank you to everybody that's tuned in. Make sure you are subscribed. Drop a like on the show. Got post notifications on, all that good stuff. We're going to have a lot of content coming out here real fast, especially as this trade deadline starts to kick up. Obviously, we've had a lot of stuff. Normally, I would do a little bit more of an in-depth intro. But today we're going to do things a little bit differently. As Ice Cube once said, actually, you know what, let me not. But if you know, you know. So anyway, as we know, Luka Doncic, man. One of the most shocking, really, and completely out of nowhere trades that we've ever seen in NBA history. Right? The details, as we know. Luka, Maxi Kleber, Markieff Morris to the Lakers. Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 unprotected Lakers first to the Mavs. The Jazz get two really ho-hum nothing seconds, but they also get Jalen Hood-Schifino, which I think, honestly, if you're the Jazz, you got to be pretty happy about this. But just a couple of things. This is the first time in NBA history that two players who made all NBA teams the previous season were dealt in the same trade for each other. And this is also a trade that has the highest average win shares from the previous season for a four-star player. And now I was going to make a video on this the night that it came out, and I was going to use that as kind of my way to drop the pod and just make a splash entrance to the game. And in a way, I am doing that, but I wanted to take some time to digest, right? I think a lot of the initial reactions for people were pretty much the same. A lot of head scratching, a lot of sitting here wondering, Dallas Mavericks, what exactly are we doing here? But I don't know that necessarily shock is how I feel sitting here now, right? With some time to digest, with some time to think, sort of sit with the trade and all that's gone into it. And I'm not really shocked anymore. I'm just kind of confused. How, why, and for what reason, if you're Nico Harrison, do you make this trade? You can give all the cop-out answers you want about conditioning. He's 270 this, 270 that. He has some injury issues. We want to buy in more to the defensive end. Anthony Davis does that. Luka Doncic. There's got to be, to me at least, something more going on behind the scenes in Dallas, specifically between Luka and Nico Harrison. Everybody that Nico Harrison brought the deal to before this happened, and he even said this in his press conferences himself. He said everybody laughed at me. Everybody was like, "Dude, what are you doing?" And now, one, not only is he a extremely brave man for publicly saying this information and outing himself like this, but two, you didn't stop to think at any point down the line when all of these people are literally, as you said yourself, laughing in your face about just even the notion that this would be a smart thing to do for the organization, but you did it anyway. And not only did you do this deal, but you sent the offer, and I guess, right, so initially, right, it was Nico Harrison sent the offer, or Rob Pelinka and Nico Harrison, who are friends, by the way, kind of had some mulling conversations, the seed got planted, and then a couple days later we got a deal. But now we're kind of learning a couple days post-trade. Part of the reason why I wanted to wait to do a video on this, we would have more details and more background coming out so I could have a more coherent and well-rounded take. The initial deal included an additional Lakers first-round pick, more than likely the 2031 pick, and Dalton Connect, in addition to Anthony Davis, Max Christie, Jalen Hood-Schifino, right, the existing package that was there for the Mavs. And you let Rob Pelinka, again, we're talking about Nico Harrison here, you let Rob Pelinka absolutely just walk you down. If I'm Nico Harrison and I thought Rob Pelinka was a good friend of mine before, absolutely not. We cannot be friends. And now maybe Nico Harrison's delusion, quite frankly, is what it truly is. It's unprofessional. I actually think it's professional malpractice, and this trade to me is a fireable offense. But you let him walk you down from a, frankly, still, in my opinion, an undersell of a package that you could have gotten. You could have gotten at bare minimum, a Mikal Bridges to the Knicks, Rudy Gobert to the Wolves type of packages. I mean, we're talking about in the same, and we'll talk about this trade too later, but just a day later, the Sacramento Kings get more draft capital and they get a player. Now, obviously, Zach LaVine, not Anthony Davis caliber, but they get a good amount of draft capital back for trading a significantly lesser player. And so, yeah, you can sit here and say that all of those gripes we have about Luka as a player, his conditioning, his shaky health, right? Maybe some of his inability to get in shape, right? Could be some red flags. And maybe you don't want to pay him $345, $350 million supermax. But to not even just like put out a word, you don't have to publicly talk about it. Now, obviously, the more ears that you bless with information and the more ears that hear information, the more likely it is for there to be a leak and for it to run public. And so maybe if you're Nico Harrison, if I'm trading Luka Doncic, I don't want it to be public because I don't want to just step up and just own it and just face whatever ramifications come with that deal. But the Lakers were the only team that they talked to. The only team that they talked to. And the package you walk away with because of your inability to properly market your trade. And look, I know there's been tons of indications. Brian Windhorst on ESPN has really been the spearhead for this. They wanted Anthony Davis, right? Like the goal wasn't just, hey, we're trading Luka. Who can we get for this? That's obviously not what they were thinking because look at what they got. And this is not to say that Anthony Davis is a scrub. Anthony Davis is a very good basketball player. Anthony Davis has been at worst a top 12 basketball player pretty much his whole career, right? Really since he entered his prime, his about that like third year in New Orleans when he really fully became this monster that he is now. And we're acting like he's a bum because of this trade. I truly am at a loss for words. And there's just no way if we're in this position and we're trading a generational player, one of the, at worst, and I think that this is even generous at worst, top 3 player in my franchise history. He's led you to a finals. He's a perennial MVP candidate. You should have been able to, if you're trading somebody like that, Dallas, you should have been able to go band for band with OKC. Now, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but San Antonio walked out of the De'Aaron Fox deal with 90% of their draft capital and all of the players they wanted to keep. And you can't even match their draft capital. And they just made a trade. It's just, I don't know. I really don't know. For Rob Pelinka, this probably just extended his Lakers tenure by at least 5 years. You do this kind of thing where even if, right, because there have been some grumblings that Golden State's called about LeBron, and as cool as I think that would be, I'm not sure how realistic it is. Now, that being said, what is realistic anymore in this day and age of NBA basketball, right? We have 5-time first-team All-NBA players getting traded for pennies on the dollar for what their value is. So who knows what that would look like, but at the end of the day, if you're Rob Pelinka and somebody's calling you saying, hey, do you want Luka Doncic? And you could walk out of there, obviously you got to give up Anthony Davis, but you walk out of there giving up being able to hold on to Rui, Dalton Connect, and Austin Reeves? What are we doing? Imagine, nobody in history. I was actually having a conversation with my buddy the other day who's a Lakers fan. And I was telling him, like, the mood around the league is very anti-Lakers. Nobody wants to help the Lakers out. Nobody wants to cut a sweetheart deal for the Lakers to try to help them be better, right? Because it's the Lakers. You look at the history of that organization. When have they not had a superstar? When have they not been one of the faces in the league? When have they not been one of the top-end talents or top-end teams in the Western Conference? And here we go. It's just another instance of them getting a guy that's going to keep them relevant and keep them competitive for another 10, 12 years. And you got it for a 31-year-old who was really, right, we're talking about this window that the Lakers have with LeBron and Anthony Davis. Well, shoot, you don't even have to keep LeBron. You got Luka. I don't know. The Lakers still need a big. They'll probably go get somebody on the lines of like Claxton, Rob Williams. I think those are their targets right now. I like Claxton more simply because he's less of a injury liability, right? You have an aging LeBron, and as nearly indestructible as he's been throughout his career, in the last 3 years, as his body started to just deteriorate, finally. You ask some people, they never thought his body was going to deteriorate. He was just going to play like a cyborg forever. But you also have Luka, who is a guy that can't stay healthy and can't stay on the floor sometimes. Robert Williams is a guy that has shown throughout his career that he's had issues, especially with his knees and lower body injuries, staying healthy and staying on the floor. And so for me, I would hate to add another less than reliable player injury-wise to my team. Now, I like Rob Williams better as a fit, and I like him better as a player just because of what he does. But for a guy that relies so much on athleticism to make his game really go, he's had 2 knee surgeries already. The Celtics were comfortable trading him. Number one, not just because you're getting Drew Holiday back, but because he's a guy who's had some inconsistencies, right? We'll see what happens. There's been some rumors that Walker Kessler's on the table for the Lakers. I just think he's going to cost too much. You guys know how Danny Ainge is, and if you don't know how Danny Ainge is, just go look at what the Celtics trade history looked like when Danny Ainge was there before Brad Stevens took over, and look at what the Jazz have done. He's very close to the chest with his assets. He's very stubborn. He is going to get the deal he wants to get at the end of the day, whether you want to do it or not. And sometimes he's kind of like that kid at the court with the ball. If you don't want to do things his way, my ball, I'm going. And we all lose. Everybody stops having fun if I'm not having fun. That's kind of the Danny Ainge MO in a lot of ways. But we'll see. I'm sure the Lakers will get something done by them not having to give up a ton of assets in this move. It really opens them up. You need a big, and then try to get as many low-priced 3-and-D players that you can possibly get. I don't know how I necessarily like the fit with LeBron and Luka on the floor at the same time. Their skill sets are relatively redundant, but we'll see what JJ does with that. I honestly could see a ton of LeBron, Luka pick and rolls with LeBron as the screener. I think you could get LeBron to buy into that a little bit. Because let's say you blitz Luka. What do you want, LeBron making decisions in the short roll if you're the defense? No. Okay, so then what do you do? Okay, I can't send 2 with the ball. Okay, so you allow Luka Doncic to play one-on-one. So there's definitely spots where this team could be really, really scary. I'm just not sure. Obviously, Luka's not healthy now. He's supposedly ramping up, but what does that really mean? Calf strains are really, really scary stuff. Right? We saw it with KD. KD rushed back from a calf strain, tore his Achilles. So, this whole calf strain stuff, this whole Achilles stuff, it's very weird. It's very delicate, I guess is the right word for me to put it, right? If it was me, I'd be more cautious than trying to accelerate. I don't know about y'all, but that 5-man unit that they rolled out to start the game, the other night against the Warriors with no AD, and it was Braun and 4 shooters. You had Reeves. It was Braun. It was Max Christie, who's obviously gone now, but Rui, and then DFS at the 5. That, to me, is a scary lineup. I've always felt like the best lineups for LeBron were just LeBron and 4 shooters. And just let him go to work. How do you stop that? And so now I think if you just continue to get shooting, not only are you prepping yourself and giving yourself a better chance this season for a deep playoff run, you're also equipping yourself for when LeBron does inevitably retire. You build teams for Luka the same way that you build teams for Bron. The only thing that I would do differently for Luka than Bron is give Luka a lob threat at the 5. Historically in Bron's career, there's not a ton of, I'll call it 1-5 PNR or 3-5 PNRs, depending on if you want to say Bron's playing the 3 or playing the 1. But he doesn't do a ton. Obviously, he's done it a decent amount with Anthony Davis, but throughout his career, he's not running pick and rolls with Kevin Love, really. He wasn't running pick and roll with Ilgauskas. Some with Bosch, but historically, that's not. He's I'm going to catch it on the post. You hear, mink, you know what I mean? Get guys in position, manipulate defense. We've all heard the Iman Shumpert stories talking about in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics in 2018. He ran the same set for an entire quarter off of literally just Marcus Morris as the help defender in the corner. If he comes, I kick it to the corner. If they rotate, swing. Or if you don't send help, it's LeBron James one-on-one with his back to the basket. Have fun. So there are definitely some spots where this could be really interesting. I'm just not sure how I feel. I just don't feel great about it. It's a weird trade. It's one of those things where it's almost reminiscent of the vetoed Chris Paul deal, right? Obviously circumstances were different for that one, but this kind of feels like to me one that Adam Silver would step in and be like, all right, I can't, like, this is just bad. Like, this is the type of trade you make in fantasy, and then you get asked not to play in the league the next year, and they don't ever tell you why. But in reality, it's because you're a terrible trader. You horribly mismanage your team, and you basically feed somebody who already has a good team a free fantasy football championship. Every league has that guy. Nico Harrison is that guy in the NBA, apparently. But as you'll see coming up a little bit later, he might have some competition with some other incompetent front offices around the league. But I'm done talking about this trade. It's just really, it's a head scratcher. A lot of questions. If you are the Lakers, there's no way that you ever say no to this deal, right? I think that's pretty clear consensus. And if you are the Dallas Mavericks, how on earth do you ever make this deal? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That's really it. Obviously, we had the De'Aaron Fox trade as well. And now for me, as a Celtics fan, I was a little disappointed about when this trade happened specifically. Maybe this is a little bit selfish, but Celtics had literally, no joke, there was still like 15 seconds left on the clock at the end of this Celtics-Sixers game. 26-point comeback. Jason Tatum turns into the best version of Jason Tatum. 35, 7, and 11. He is 15, 4, and 4 in the fourth quarter. No TOs, 3 threes. Like, huge game for his clutch player of the year case. And literally, no joke, the ESPN broadcast cuts out with like 15, 20 seconds left in this game. And they're talking about the De'Aaron Fox trade. So, as much as I would have loved for there to be any shine on Jason Tatum and on the Boston Celtics, I'll admit, De'Aaron Fox getting traded, Wemby getting help, just a little bit more exciting than the Celtics coming back against the hospital 76ers. But let's dive into this trade. Spurs get De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin. The Kings in this deal get Zach LaVine, Sidi Sissoko, 2025 first-round pick from the Hornets. Now, I don't know right off the top of my head if this is unprotected or not. If it is unprotected, boy, is that a real interesting piece for the Kings to move in any subsequent deal they want to do at the deadline here. They also get a 27 first from the Spurs and a 31 first from the Timberwolves. The Spurs pick kind of whatever. Probably it won't be a lottery pick. It'll probably be somewhere in the 20s, early to mid 20s more than likely. That 31 Timberwolves pick, though, is kind of interesting because just like everything else, who knows what the Timberwolves are going to look like 6 years from now, right? Anthony Edwards may not even be on the roster. And if that's the case, then obviously that 31 first-round pick looks pretty enticing. But if the T-Wolves are still really good, then that's a terrible pick. And that's kind of the risk you run, but that's also the intriguing part about these picks, that not only as a team giving them up, but a team receiving them, it's kind of a gamble you're willing to make sometimes for both parties. Kings also get a couple of seconds from the Nuggets and the Bulls. Cool. They get their own 2028 second-round pick back. Cool. The Bulls, the last piece, really the huge cog that made this trade actually possible, and maybe what helped the Kings feel comfortable taking on maybe a lesser package from San Antonio, right? Because you're getting Zach LaVine back, maybe, and you could look at it and you say, oh man, they got 6 picks in this deal. We don't know what 2 of them are going to be. One of them obviously looks really good, like I touched on, but you never know. Sidy Cissoko could be cool. He could turn into something, but he's kind of just a flyer young player that you throw into the deal and make the money match, and who knows what he could turn into, years down the line. He's very, very young. He's been okay in very limited spots this year, but nothing that's crazy exciting. But the Bulls, Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and then they get their own pick back. And I have some mixed feelings about this. So the deal with this 2025 pick that the Spurs had, right, that they get back, this was, I believe this was a pick used in the DeMar DeRozan deal that sent him from San Antonio to Bulls. A lot of weird, full circle moments in this deal that included, right, DeMar was a Spur. He gets traded from the Spurs to the Bulls, and then the Bulls sign and trade him to the Kings, and now Zach LaVine, who played with DeMar in Chicago, right? They're now reunited. It's kind of just a lot of weird, full circle stuff going on here. I feel really good about this deal for the Spurs. You kept Castle. You kept Sohan. You kept Keldon Johnson. And you kept Devin Vassell. Now, Keldon Johnson was in this trade for I don't know, about 30 seconds, and then Sidy Cissoko ended up replacing him. I think the money just made more sense having Sissoko in the deal over Keldon Johnson. While the value may not be there, I think, inevitably Sissoko ended up with the Kings. I think, as far as I understand it, Keldon Johnson would have been a Bull. The Bulls not wanting Keldon Johnson is weird, just based on how they're moving. It's not like they're just acquiring a bunch of expiring contracts and draft capital. They're really acquiring a bunch of nothing. And I've seen a lot of reports saying that Trey Jones probably won't even suit up for the Bulls at any point in time. They're going to immediately try to find another team to pass him along to for some draft capital. The Kings, this looks okay, I guess. I don't really know what you're expecting. At least from an organizational perspective, you now have the assets to match the Nets' asking price for Cam Johnson. And I've seen a lot of reports that are connecting that. I would hate that deal for the Kings almost as much as I'm lukewarm on this deal now. How much better are you really with Zach LaVine instead of De'Aaron Fox? I fully expected that De'Aaron Fox would get moved in the offseason, and the Kings would just try to get what they can out of this season. If you make the play-in, you make the play-in. If you're able to squeak into the playoffs as a 7 or 8 seed, then you squeak into the playoffs as a 7 or 8 seed. But right now, they're on the outside looking in. And as good as they were at the beginning of the Doug Christie era, they've not been very good. They're 5-5 in their last 10 after starting 9-1 in the month of January. In my first initial recording, secrets out, this is like the fourth time that I've actually recorded this first episode. And I guess the timing worked out well for this to really be the one. But as a part of that, part of the segment I was going to do involves some interesting stats that I had found and pulled from around the league. And in that 9-1 stretch to start the month of January, DeMar DeRozan was third in the NBA in win shares. Been a lot of conversation about how different his offensive game looks under Doug Christie, right? He's now taking like 4 threes a game. Before that, he was taking 2. I don't know how many times in DeMar DeRozan's career you can count that he's taken multiple above the break threes in a game. He's taken above the break threes way more. And so he kind of just looks a lot different. But for me, it's really been the defensive buy-in that's been a huge thing for me. You always think of at least this era of Kings teams and its association with Mike Brown is we're going to get out, we're going to run, and we're going to try to be a good enough defensive team that our offense is good enough to win games, right? I liken it a lot to the Lincoln Riley era of Oklahoma football, right? That era of Big 12 football is basically it was basketball on grass, right? It was, I'm just going to score more than you and trust that maybe our defense isn't necessarily going to get us stops, but you're going to make mistakes and we're just not going to make mistakes offensively. And that's a lot of really what that playoff team looked like for the Kings a couple years ago. And obviously they lost in the first round, but that Warriors team was pretty good. But under Doug Christie, they've been a lot better defensively, and that was something that I was planning on highlighting. But in these last 10 games, the defense has kind of fallen back to where they were. They're back middle of the pack defensive efficiency. I didn't mention it, but in those first 10 games of January, they were a top 6 defense to start the month of January. Much, much improved. Their offense was pretty consistently around that 8 to 11 mark. That's kind of where they've been most of the season. But they were looking good. And so, again, I kind of just thought that the Kings would let it play out, see what was going to happen. Then, obviously, De'Aaron Fox asks out, and you're kind of like, well, man. And really, from an organizational perspective, right, it's been pretty clear now for a little bit that the Kings were never going to offer him the extension that he wanted, regardless of his willingness and fervor to actually go out and pen that deal. The Kings just weren't going to offer it to him. And so he said, okay, cool, y'all don't want to pay me, I'll go somewhere where they will pay me. So I fully expect De'Aaron Fox to extend in San Antonio. But the Kings are just still, they're kind of just still in limbo. Even if you go out and you get a Cam Johnson or you make some sort of move with the assets that you have now, what are we really doing? We're not better than the Nuggets. We're certainly not better than the Rockets, Grizzlies, Thunder. I don't think you're better than the Clippers. Even the new look Mavs, I'm not sure that you're better than. Phoenix Suns right now, you're below in the standings. And so even though you're sitting right at 500 in that 10 seed, right on the cusp of not being in the play-in, it's going to have to be pretty dramatic, right? And now obviously the Spurs look a lot better. The Spurs are on the outside looking in. They could very easily be risers and come in and take that spot from the Kings. And so that would, for me, that would be absolute worst case scenario if I'm a Kings fan. If we walk out of this where we trade our franchise star, one of the best people to ever put on a jersey in our franchise's history. Now, Kings have a little bit limited history here, but nonetheless, certainly an upper echelon talent for our franchise. Just to potentially completely miss the playoffs altogether and have a lottery pick? How much realistically does the 13th overall pick or the 14th, 15th overall pick do for a franchise like the Kings, or at least where the state of the Kings is as a team? And it's not a great feeling. It feels like they're kind of just prolonging the inevitable. A lot of it feels pretty similar to how I feel about the Bulls, but just kind of in a different way. The Bulls obviously now are kind of entering that tank mode. I fully expect here before the deadline for Vucevic to get moved as well. But then what does that team look like? You have guys that aren't tank players. You're wanting to move Trey Jones, who was the youngest and has the most room to grow and potential for upside out of all 3 guys that you acquired. And it's like, so what? I still have to figure out what I want to do with Josh Giddey in the offseason. There's now reports that they could potentially trade Kobe White. And I would be in favor of that personally, not just for Kobe, but for the sake of the franchise. Just rebuild. Y'all had a cool little run where you were a fake 1 seed for half the season. You made Chicago fans believe again. But Bulls fans don't deserve this. The Karnišovas administration has been really brutal. As a front office, much like Nico Harrison, there's been some gross professional malpractice. For the 3 stars of Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Alex Caruso, you have managed to walk out with 3 picks, 2 of them being second-round picks, and your own pick back. Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and Chris Duarte. And then you got Josh Giddey and the Alex Caruso deal. For Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, and Alex Caruso. Part of me doesn't even want to see them trade Kobe White because they're just going to get fleeced. This is really a story, the Bulls are, of a lack of self-awareness. This thing should have been blown up 2 years ago. And even now, unless you trade Kobe White, it's not looking like you're really going to enter full tank mode anyway. I just, man, I feel bad for Bulls fans. I really do. Y'all deserve better than this. Last thing I'll say in this trade, for the Spurs, dude, this is scary. De'Aaron Fox is 6th in the NBA in points per direct score from the pick and roll as the ball handler. Victor Wembanyama is 2nd in the NBA on points per direct score as a pick and roll screener. So you have 2 guys that are overwhelmingly proficient at being and playing in a pick and roll action. What's not to like? I think the only thing that for me I would like more is if De'Aaron Fox was more of a playmaker, right? Like for me, when we were kind of labbing up in this offseason, like, okay, where can we get Wemby some help? I was a huge advocate for Trae Young. We know what Trae Young can do in pick and roll. We know what Trae Young is as a passer, as a facilitator, throwing lobs and whatnot. And I really thought that would be a really special connection. De'Aaron Fox is a little bit more of a shot creator, right? Trae Young's mid-range game is not something that he uses a ton. De'Aaron Fox loves the mid-range. He's even extended out to being a much more consistent three-point shooter. And honestly, that's something off the dribble three-point shooting outside of Wemby, right? Like Vassell can do it a little bit, but he's much more of a mid-range maestro. Stephon Castle can't shoot. He's actually statistically the worst jump shooter in the NBA, which is okay. He's a rookie. I'm not trying to bash on Stephon Castle. I actually love Stephon Castle. I think he's going to be an absolutely amazing NBA player. And for them to hold on to him in this deal is a crazy win for the Spurs. But you don't have a ton of really elite shooting options either off the dribble from 3 or catch and shooting from 3. And I think De'Aaron Fox helps you a little bit in that. I think Trae Young would have helped you a little bit more. But nonetheless, fleece. I saw some Spurs fans on the timeline earlier talking about, I'm sorry, Brian Wright, for slandering you in the past, for how you handled the LaMarcus Aldridge situation, for how you handled the DeMar DeRozan situation, for how you handled a lot of different things. But even the Kawhi Leonard thing, I saw too, some Spurs fans were apologizing for slandering him there. But this dude has been dialed. I'm also hearing some reports, just some stirrings that the Spurs may not be done. Like I said, they held on to 90% of their actual tradable asset pool. Right, that's between young players with potential, and draft capital. You hold on to a lot here, and there's potential that they could do something else. I don't really know what that would be. Charles Bassey's a pretty good, pretty serviceable backup 5. Mamu's not great, right? You could probably upgrade at that 3-4 pivot spot, but you have Sohan. But again, this is kind of back to what I was talking about with just an overall lack of shooting. Who's your best catch and shoot guy? Harrison Barnes, right? Like old man HB. And while he's cool as a vet presence, right, if we're thinking about, right, De'Aaron Fox is 26, 27 years old. Vassell's young. Castle's young. Keldon Johnson's relatively young. Sohan's young. Obviously, Wemby's Wemby, right? Like, we're building a core here of really young guys. Julian Champagnie is actually super tough. Very underrated player. When I said Harrison Barnes is their best catch and shooter, Champagnie had slipped my mind. He's their best catch and shoot player. He's had some nights where he's had 30. He's had some nights where he's had 5, 6 plus threes. So he's got potential if he continues to improve at his craft to be a real sniper. He's a very, very good defender. So maybe you don't want to go get somebody at that 3-2 spot, right? Somebody that's a wing, but I don't know. They could do something cool. I hope that it's a right fit, not only financially, but the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? I would hate for you to trade up I would hate for you to give up some high quality assets to get somebody back that doesn't work out. You've seen a lot of teams that take risks on guys that are iffy fits. And, DeJounte Murray is actually exactly what I was thinking of, right? Speaking of the Spurs. Not a great fit on the Hawks. Get well soon, DeJounte Murray, by the way. That guy cannot catch a break right now, and neither can the Pels. That might be a cursed franchise at this point. But if they can find the right piece, if it makes sense, it fits not just now, but later down the line. If I'm the Spurs, I say go for it. If you can't find the perfect deal, keep your pieces, and you just wait for something to come up. But yeah, man, Bulls fans, I'm really sorry. Kings fans, maybe it's exciting to still be in the mix because you were out of the mix for so long. But Spurs fans should be really happy. And I think this is going to be a pretty scary combo moving forward with these two leading the helm of this Spurs team. As awesome as those two trades were, they're probably not going to be the end of what we see at the deadline. I didn't mention it, but Drew Eubanks and Patty Mills are Clippers. This happened a couple days ago. Not too much to mention here, but if you're the Clippers, you finally get off that PJ Tucker money. You finally do something with it. I don't expect PJ Tucker to ever put on a Utah Jazz jersey. I expect him to just honestly kick it at the crib and just get paid. But, I'm a little surprised. Actually, Mo Bamba got moved. He showed. I feel like he showed some good flashes, giving Zubac some rest this year. He's still just not the best rim protector. He certainly should be a better rim protector given his size and given his length. He just fouls too much. His positioning could be a lot better. He doesn't move his feet very well. He gets caught a step behind a lot of times, and then he overextends to try to get a block, foul, stuff like that. So Drew Eubanks is maybe a little bit more consistent in that aspect. It's kind of tough to tell. He was good on the Suns. I actually liked him a lot on the Suns last year. And he's kind of just been whatever for the Jazz. I thought it was funny. The Clippers official Twitter account, they posted, hey, we've acquired Drew Eubanks for PJ Tucker, such and such, right? And then they immediately quote tweeted that with a happy birthday graphic for Drew Eubanks, which I thought was funny. Some other very important deadline news. This Jimmy Butler thing, can we just get it over with already? I'm kind of getting sick of it. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I'm a little over it at this point. I'll go anywhere. Just get me out of here. Okay, but not Memphis. Okay, but not Golden State. Well, here's the thing, Jimmy Butler. There are not 29 teams that can and will trade for you. Despite what you might think about yourself, you are not a highly valued commodity around the league at age 36, physically deteriorating, and on a very large contract. That's a difficult pill for teams to swallow. With the Warriors officially out, we're basically left with just the Suns and Bucks as real suitors. I can't imagine he just goes somewhere like dumpy for no reason, right? Like a Charlotte or something like that. I don't think he just gets thrown off the books. But Bradley Beal has not openly said, but behind closed doors, there's been some reports coming out that Bradley Beal just doesn't want to uproot his family again. And now to me, it's like, well, all right, bro. You played for 2 teams, okay? You're in Washington for a huge part of your career, and now you're in Phoenix. 2 places. And I get it, you're aging, and you kind of want to find a spot to just settle down with, and so you're unwilling to waive your no trade clause, but I don't want to underestimate here how much power he actually has this deadline. He could really just kind of put a halt on everything as he has been. And so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I think Pat Riley just needs to get rid of him and get what he can get. But we'll see. Additionally, with the Suns, this Nurkic, also saga, if you want to call it that, where he's basically not been with the team. His relationship with Bud is irreparable at this point, and the Suns are essentially doing everything that they can to get him out and get something that's worth anything at all to them that helps them get just even a little bit better. But just as of today, like a couple hours ago, teams were calling for Kevin Durant. And there's been some murmurs that if the Suns can't push something over the line with Jimmy Butler, that they might consider just blowing it up. And that would suck. I don't know how much I buy that, just given the tendencies of Matt Ishbia, right? I mean, the first thing, I don't even think that the guy got his office fully set up before Kevin Durant was a Sun after he bought the team, right? Like, it just felt like when Matt Ishbia took over that there's just been an insane amount happening, and he's been uber aggressive, and he's been fully bought into what this team wants to do to try to get this championship and capitalize on Kevin Durant. I can't blame him. If I have Kevin Durant on my team, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that he has a good team around him. And it's just tough when you go out and you handcuff yourself like you do with 3 max contract guys, and then you bring in Nurkic, who's not on a supremely team-friendly contract either. You kind of handcuff yourself, and then you're left with trying to consolidate all of your leftover money into getting some decent role players, and it just hasn't worked out well for them. I've always been a fan of the 2 superstar, the duo model, and then putting more high-level complementary players around them. I just think building a big 3, especially in this day and age with the CBA being what it is and the first and second apron rules and, you know, the freezing of draft picks if you're over the apron for consecutive years. There's a lot of stuff that has affected the way that teams build rosters. And when you kind of buy all into this superstar mold, you wind up with Oso Ighodaro being your starting center. Now, Oso Ighodaro has been fantastic this year, I think, but not a starting center on a championship caliber team. We kind of thought early Tyus Jones was going to be the answer, right? Like, all Frank Vogel wanted when he was there was to get a point guard. They didn't get him a point guard. The offense sucked. They kicked him. So we'll see what happens in Phoenix. They're just kind of in a weird spot. Shout out Devin Booker, though. He's like 25 points off being the all-time franchise leader in points. That'd be pretty cool for him to have. At least for me, when I think of Phoenix Suns, he's up there when I think about Steve Nash, when I think about Amari Stoudemire, when I think about Charles Barkley, when I think about Sean Marion, right? Like, Devin Booker, for me, is in that conversation. And obviously the Suns don't have a super rich history, but they have some Hall of Fame type guys that have played for this franchise. And so for Devin Booker, he's going to get it. Huge honor for him, I think. Major props to him. Moving on. The Magic and Bulls, right? So we talked about the Bulls earlier, and I had already mentioned just trade Kobe White. Well, kind of seems like the Bulls are already putting that in motion. The Magic and the Bulls have kind of had some early preliminary talks surrounding a Kobe White deal. There's nothing concrete, but just kind of some feeling out what's the price tag Kobe White. The Magic have a plethora of young talent that they could get rid of. Excuse me, not get rid of. That sounds like we're just throwing them to the side. But, you know, Trent Queen, Jet Howard, I'd imagine you'd want to hold on to Anthony Black. But, Wendell Carter could be a guy that could go back in the deal to help try to make money match. Because Wendell Carter has been absolutely atrocious, especially from 3 this year. So we'll see. I have been a huge advocate for a while now, really since last year in the playoffs, of the Magic going out and getting a shot-creating type of complementary guard. Jalen Suggs has kind of tried to be that, and right, especially in the NBA Cup, right? We saw it in that semifinal game against the Bucks. Jalen Suggs was hooping without Paolo, without Franz, and they've been really bad as of late. Things were starting to look okay. They kind of stayed afloat when Paolo first went down. They stayed afloat again when Jalen Suggs went down. But now that Paolo and Franz are back, they look bad. And I think that this would be a good move for them. Jalen Suggs is just, I don't think he's enough of a pure point guard. And now Kobe White's not a floor general, I don't think. But certainly, I think, more consistently capable of being that floor general type guy, getting into actions, running sets, things like that, really commanding the floor. I think he's grown a lot in that sort of puff my chest out, be the alpha kind of guy on the court. And obviously, he's not going to be asked to be the alpha. That's what Paolo Banchero is there for. But certainly to be another additional scoring piece. Defense is not the problem. We know the Magic's MO is defense. Historically, today, yesterday, tomorrow, it's going to continue to be defense. The Magic love them, some athletic, defensive-minded wings who can't shoot, which is why they are where they can defend, but they can't score. And I think Kobe White, for them, solved a lot of those problems. If they can't get a Kobe White deal done, Anthony Simons would be the next guy that I would call about. And I honestly, I think I like Kobe White more because Anthony Simons is less of a true point guard. I would honestly even say Jalen Suggs is more of a pure point guard, even though he's kind of a combo guard with a little bit of playmaking, but he's not a true run my offense, floor general type of guy. Really, none of these three are, but I'm not sure that you need that. Paolo could play point guard for you for all I care. And then the last thing we got. There have been some rumors of trades, right? And I won't even necessarily be specific with which ones they are because it's not really relevant for what I want to talk about here. But be grateful for the trade deadline. Obviously, we've gotten some pretty great league-altering trades in the last 2 days. We're not going to see anything coming up here at that Thursday deadline that's going to come close to the last 2 trades we saw. I don't think. Even if Jimmy Butler gets moved, I don't think that has as great of an impact as a De'Aaron Fox trade, as a Luka Doncic trade does. Not just for the Western Conference, but for the league in general. And so, all of this to say is that when we are intelligent basketball fans, which is something that I'm going to preach a lot on this show, about being intelligent, critically thinking basketball fans, P with a plug, Pierre Andreessen, somebody I've watched for a while now. He kind of brought this up on his own when he was talking about the Dorian Finney-Smith trade when the Lakers made it a couple weeks ago, right? And he also likened this to what the Thunder have done to help build the roster up to where they are. Sometimes a double is okay. Sometimes a base hit is okay. You don't always have to try to hit a bomb. You don't always have to try to completely swing out of your ass to try to, go deep. Sometimes the conservative move is a much better move. Alex Caruso, Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, pieces like that the Thunder have acquired over time, slowly. These guys are now major rotational pieces for them. Dorian Finney-Smith, right? The Lakers, as we see, have a knack for these huge star-studded trades where they're kind of just chasing names to try to get stars on the team. Russell Westbrook. We see how that worked out. And so, much like how people were talking about this last draft class, oh, we're not going to get any stars. There's not going to be any elite All-NBA players. We're not going to get any All-NBA players getting moved, I don't think. Jimmy Butler would be the only guy. But again, I don't know that that shakes up the landscape of the league. So when we see role players get moved, let's think critically and use our noggins when we see these trades and not complain that we're not getting blockbuster deals. The Luka Doncic trade should be more than enough blockbuster for the next full calendar year. I don't think we should undervalue or undersell that trade in terms of its magnitude and its effect on how we view the league in its totality moving forward. Same thing goes for the deadline. So when we see Cam Johnson get traded, don't be like, oh man, I would love for Cam Johnson to be in Memphis. I think that is the most ideal spot for him, and if he's not going to end up there, OKC, just get off the contracts you got to get off of. You have 88,000 draft picks. You could get Cam Johnson done in a heartbeat. That is literally such a perfect fit for them. But I'd like him in Memphis too. But like even if we see Walker Kessler get moved, yawn at Walker Kessler. I talked about Claxton and Rob Williams for the Lakers earlier. There's going to be some guys that maybe seem insignificant on paper, but role players win championships. I had this argument with one of my buddies the other day about people winning on their own. And I was like, well, who has ever won on their own? There have been guys that have gotten to the finals on their own, right? Who have led teams that far basically on their own. You can't win alone. Robert Horry has 7 championship rings for a reason. There's a reason that he played on all the championship caliber teams that he played on. You need role players like that to go win. KCP won championships on two different teams in a 3-year span. Elite role player, championship level role player. So let's not forget that, especially when we have the buyout market coming up too. Some stuff may seem insignificant, but can really make or break teams, especially when you're looking at teams that have injuries, teams that don't have a lot of depth at these positions, trying to shore stuff up as we get to the second half of the season and as we really start to tighten up and ratchet down on these playoff races. These guys are going to be important for these teams. The entire reason, or a very large part of why the Celtics were as historically great last year as they were, wasn't necessarily directly due to just Jaylen Brown and just Jason Tatum, or not just because they traded for Kristaps, or not just because they traded for Drew Holiday, but it's all of those things. The Celtics don't win a championship without Derek White, without Drew Holiday, without Kristaps Porzingis, without Al Horford. All 4 of those. There's only really Drew Holiday, I think, is a one-time All-Star. Kristaps Porzingis is a one-time All-Star. Drew Holiday is not an All-Star. Al Horford at one point was an All-Star, but he's never been an All-Star caliber player on the Celtics. And so when you look at these guys that are impactful off the bench for these championship teams, where do we think that these guys come from? Not everybody is drafted and developed into being a quality role player. Sometimes you make... When the Celtics traded for Derek White a couple years ago, everybody was like, oh, what are we doing here? Like, Derek White, really? And for the first couple months Derek White was in a Celtics jersey, he sucked. He was bad. And even that 22 year, outside of game 1 in the finals, Derek White did not play well. It's like he had the yips almost. And then you give him another year to play. He gets a little bit better. And then he blossoms into basically the all-star role player that he is, where a guy that is only averaging 16 is getting all-star buzz. Guys like that get moved at the deadline. So whether it's Luka Doncic or whether it's Drew Eubanks, understand that a lot of these moves are not just for the sake of it, just because we can. And NBA GMs don't work that way. Even the Danny Ainge little 1 for 3, right? They get the 2031 Phoenix pick unprotected, and they give up 3 not so valuable first round picks that they had of their own. That's an impactful trade. That could allow the Suns to go out and get some guys because they now have increased their immediate capital at the expense. They're essentially mortgaging their future to try to get more assets in the now, which honestly I think could be a model adopted by more of these teams in similar situations where you're handcuffed in terms of your capital, you're handcuffed in terms of your roster flexibility when it comes to contracts and actual movable, valuable assets. Being able to say, hey, look, here's a pick 8 years from now, completely unprotected. You don't know what it's going to be. We got some older aging guys. Our window's small, so this is going to be valuable to you later down the line. Give us 3 picks this year, or give us 2 this year and 1, whatever combination of immediate picks that you can now essentially liquidize and go use. And now, obviously, that not really much that's come out of that for Phoenix. But I would imagine that deal was 100% to set them up for Jimmy Butler. But we'll see. We'll see. But again, don't lose sight of what's actually happening. Be a fan with critical thought. This is not a podcast where we're going to talk about narratives. We're going to talk about hypotheticals. Where we're going to talk about a ton of like, well, if this, then that. We are a logical, non-narrative based show here. And I encourage all of you to consume the game in that fashion. Even if it's from a casual perspective, inquire into why things are the way they are. I have some friends who'd send me some wild stuff like, yo, what do you think about, maybe this guy could get there. I'm like, dude, the money, there's not even a remote possibility that the money matches. And I don't even think you need to be a super in-depth. You don't need to be an NBA podcaster to obtain this knowledge. It's very easy to go and look at this stuff. Super easy to. But all it does is enrich your understanding. This far into the show, you're a dog. I really do appreciate all of you guys for taking the time to listen to a washed, part bionic, ex-college baseball pitcher to give his opinion on basketball, of all things. All in all, this show has been long overdue. This has been something that I've kind of thought about myself for a while and was getting some push and some real drive to do this from some people around me as well. And I finally decided that, let's just do it. And let me tell you, getting to just this point now where I'm actually recording content to be uploaded, I'm not going to keep it a secret. This is not the first time that I've recorded an episode. This is not the first time that I will be editing an episode. We've had to deal with some interesting things to get to where we are right now. Technical side, me not fully grasping what I needed to be prepared for this, things of that nature. But the one thing that I was never underprepared for was my eyes and what I think is a pretty good understanding of the league, not just from a actual hoops, X's and O's perspective, but from a how things work in the NBA and why they're different to other leagues. And I think that's what makes the NBA so unique, is just kind of all the things that go into that, all the different variables that matter and drive the league to being what it is, not just as a sports product, but as an entertainment industry. And so, if I'm being completely honest, I have no idea where this is going to go or what's going to happen long term with this show. But I'm here. I think perfect timing doesn't exist necessarily. I always think you're in the timing that you're supposed to be in. And, going through all the difficulties that I was going through to get an episode uploaded, maybe there were some questions for me of, dude, this is so hard. Like there's so many roadblocks. Do I really need to be doing this? Is this the right thing for me? And then as I'm literally getting ready to finally, after I've gotten rid of my old laptop that completely crapped out on me, bought a brand new PC, not happy about it, but it is what it is, and then be able to get my setup the way that I wanted it to look, we have the most incredible out of left field trade in the history of the sport. And if that's not timing to tell me that this is where I'm supposed to be and what I should be doing, then I don't really know what is. Hopefully that as we develop a rapport and a relationship between, me and you, the viewer, and I continue to earn your respect, and my opinion continues to hold more value with you guys. I'm never going to lie to you guys. I'll be honest. If I don't know something, I'll just tell you I don't know it. But I try to be a student of the game wherever I can be and learn things where I may not have had knowledge previously. I don't have a background in basketball. My background is in baseball. My almost entire sports career was just playing baseball. I played football up to the varsity level in high school, but I played baseball collegiately. I was throwing a baseball at 4 years old, and I played all the way until my arm finally just gave out. But I become a student of the game, and honestly, through some pretty awesome podcasts that I've been able to get into, specifically, actually, the JJ Redick podcast. Obviously, he doesn't do that now. He's coach of the Lakers. But he made a point one time about trying to be a curious basketball fan, in a sense, right? And so I kind of took that to heart. And a lot of that, to me, how I interpret that is essentially retracing steps, right? So we could look at a Clippers game. James Harden just scored on a wide open layup. Okay, how did we get the layup? All right, boom. James Harden walked the ball up. He got guys directed, called Zoo for the screen. Zubac sets the high pick and roll. He's playing drop. The center's playing drop. James Harden drives. The center steps to the center that's rolling, which is Zoo, and James Harden takes a free layup. Or, okay, there was a lob because instead of this center in drop, instead of him staying attached on the roller, he's now stepping out to stop the ball at James Harden, and now James Harden just floater over the top. So things like that, stuff, like understanding actions, understanding why we're getting into these actions, understanding how teams are manipulating defenses to get what they want to do and get the matchups they want to do, and really being resilient in that. There was on the Mind the Game podcast, right? The LeBron JJ podcast. There was a segment they were talking about where they were covering the finals, right? And they talked about how relentless Luka is getting the switch. And now for Luka, the switch that he wants is a big. Luka Doncic runs, I think, the highest percentage of 1-5 pick and rolls in the league right now. James Harden, I think, is second in that by a pretty close margin. But almost every action that Luka's involved in is either an isolation action or a 1-5 or an X5 high pick and roll, where he's throwing a lot, right? It's the whole Houston model. We've seen James Harden do this 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times even. But I enjoy consuming basketball like that. And honestly, I hope you guys enjoy consuming basketball like that as well, because that's going to be a large foundation of the show. I'm not telling you what happened. Obviously, today was a little bit different. I'm not breaking down basketball necessarily. We're just talking about trades and how that impacts the league. But, when we start talking about games and actually what we're watching on the court, it's going to be less of just this guy scored X amount of points. This was the score of the game. On to the next. That's not the fan that I try to be. That's not the content creator that I want to be for you guys. I think you deserve higher quality content than that. I think that that's insulting to your intelligence as a fan. Anybody can go to NBA.com and look at a box score. I don't need to make content reading a box score to you guys. I don't need to make content reading standings to you guys, right? Anybody could do that. I don't know that that's necessarily a good use of my time or a good use of my brain power. But what I am going to ask from you guys is be curious about what you don't know. And I know that's simple, but I think a lot of times when we don't know something or there's something in our life that we're uncertain about our ability to be successful in, we kind of shy away from it or we avoid our weaknesses. And so for me, watching basketball critically was a weakness. I didn't know much about basketball. My only experience extensive experience playing basketball is like rec center pickups. I was on a team with my friends in high school, but I was just kind of there for vibes. And I played on like my middle school team, like when I was in like 8th grade. Just why not? I didn't play this thing. I am a hoops fan because I like watching basketball. Truly, my family's not basketball fans. There was no influence. There was no push for me to become a basketball fan. I fell in love with hoops by just watching hoops and enjoying the game. And so, if you are somebody who watches basketball for the entertainment of the sport and for the drama and the intrigue and all the off-court hoopla and this guy's getting in trouble and this guy's not getting in trouble, whatever, it's probably not the show for you. But if you're a fan who wants to have rational, logical discourse about basketball, brother, you're in the right spot. This is where you want to be if that's how you want to consume basketball. And so I'm hoping, I know that there's a lot of intelligent fans out there. I just hope that we connect and we get on the right page and like I said earlier, we build that rapport and that connection between the two of us, and it turns into a community of sorts. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Any support at this early stage is amplified by 100. You guys are getting early. And I want to be clear. What you're seeing right now is the lowest quality my content is going to be. It is only going to improve from here. But I want y'all's feedback. Let me know in the comments. Ask me questions. Things you want me to talk about. It doesn't even have to be basketball related necessarily. Personal questions. Whatever. Just drop a comment. Do something. Like the video. All that good stuff. Also, I will leave the official ATB Pod Twitter link in the comments as well. Go give it a follow. Turn on notifications. I plan on live tweeting a lot of games that I'm watching and being super involved over there. So go over there, follow me, and then tweet me your most outrageous hot takes. I kind of want to see something. All right, this has been the Above the Break podcast, Season 1, Episode 1. Y'all are tapped in early. I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.